Hello and welcome to the Comedian's Outlook. I'm Lee Cantony and this is the podcast where I speak to fellow comedians about their world of comedy. This week I'm joined by a fan and a regular listener of the podcast, Ben Aveling, who is also a stand-up comic. He's been going for just under a year, but he's got so much potential and I think he's going to go on to great things. He's a really funny guy, great guy to hang out with, and he also runs a really good night called the Ben Aveling's Comedy Stew, so definitely go and check that out. But without further ado, please welcome a fan and a great comedian to the podcast, Ben Aveling. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Ben. Firstly, just tell me a little bit about how you first got into comedy.
Well, it was mainly after I listened to a few audiobooks of other comedians, and namely, actually, I was listening to Michael McIntyre's autobiography randomly in the van one day, and it would just touch on loads of times that he was going around the Jongleurs clubs. Do you remember? Okay. He worked for them for like something like, I don't know. I
think it's closed now, isn't it?
Yeah, Jongleurs is gone. It was like 10 years, and he sort of in it touched on the cliche sort of one day I just decided I was going to do it kind of thing. And me being my whole life really all I've been a joke cracker, class clown, and I thought I wanted to do it when I was at school, at secondary school. So I had the whole sit down with the teachers, and they said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to be a comedian. Aren't I funny?" You know, and without even realising it or being directly told, I very quickly was just completely put it on the back burner. Completely. I never thought about it again, to God's honest truth, till recently. Yeah. Literally, I never even considered being a comedian ever in my adult life. It never even crossed my mind.
So I thought, I think I was in your second. Was I in your second gig?
You were at my first gig. Yeah.
Okay, and that was at First Laughs. Great night, by the way. Go down. First Tuesday every month.
Big tick.
So your first gig was in First Laughs, which used to be at the Channel Depot, and now it's at the Thirsty.
Back room at Thirsty.
So tell me about your first gig. What sort of preparation did you do beforehand?
Well, I had no idea what I was doing, standard, but thought I did. I basically went through a few funny things that I'd thought of out the blue that I'd discuss with my wife. The sort of stuff you talk about in the car on a journey. Things that we found funny about social media was actually my main focus. Yeah. And because it's only 5 minutes, I say only 5 minutes, I thought, I could get loads in there in 5 minutes. And I just picked on a few things that I thought were really funny about basically dickheads on social media showing off. Yeah. And I had a proper way to finish it off with a decent, which I still use now, but much more refined, about Facebook troll. A little story that actually happened to me. And that's all I did. And I remember practicing it all the way there. My brother rang me to wish me good luck and stuff like that, and I said, here's a few for you then, this is what I'm going to say tonight, as a guinea pig, if you like, on the hands-free whilst I was driving, and randomly not that nervous about it. I was excited, felt completely like I was supposed to do it, and gave it a go.
Yeah. And then you're hooked ever since.
Pretty much.
So after that, what was the next? Because I was at that gig. It went pretty well for you. I mean, it was a little bit annoying being someone that's been doing it for a bit longer than you, that you just came on in your first gig and nailed it. Because I remember, and interestingly, my first gig also went really well. But what happened afterwards? Did you get this surge of energy afterwards? Or?
Yeah, I think the first gig was naivety taking over, because I actually gave zero fucks getting on the stage. You know what I mean? You sort of because I didn't know what to expect. And then second gig was, and I'm an avid fan of your podcast, so I've heard this a few times. It was an open mic night with music. Yeah, I made the fatal error, and I turned up. And they said, no problem. And I was there. There was no structure to the night, no other comedy. It was all people really taking their music seriously with and at the end of the night, by the way, this guy's going to come do some comedy for you now. There's quite a few people there. They got some decent laughs. But I straight away was, it pinned me down a bit more. And then I went home that night going, all right, don't do that again, / maybe I've got to do a bit more work at this.
It's never good for the self-esteem.
No.
And I mean, there is a place for, like, the music open mic nights is a good, again, if it's just speaking out loud, then there is something there.
And there's an exception to the rule. I've heard people say there's this one that's really good because people expect it to be music and comedy.
So they do exist.
They do, yeah.
And some promoters do try and fit both in. I mean, I struggle with them. I mean, the music open mic nights did pretty well. I did all right at.
Yeah.
Then it's all people do get a little bit annoyed with you when you're there and you're the one, trying to make them laugh when they're there to listen to music and listen to unsigned bands and artists and stuff. But so after that, like obviously after you've done a couple of gigs, your process of how you write material changed. How? Because I'm a bit concerned that one of your first sort of inspirations was Michael McIntyre, because I'm sure that's probably a lot of comedians' first inspiration, but they're so honed, they're so perfected, they're so kind of far down the line that actually to see yourself as someone like Michael McIntyre is kind of like skips out all the slog.
Absolutely. So the reason the Michael McIntyre book hit home with me is because I was in a position where I have my own business. I work hard, but I'm relatively flexible.
Yeah.
And it just made me sort of, regardless of his story, made me go, actually, that would be possible. And I mean, he's a very unique comedian, and I wouldn't say I'm anything like him in some senses. But whereas I wouldn't say I grew up watching him, because obviously he's relatively new. So there's lots of comedians I have a real affinity with that have absolutely changed my life forever, and I'll always know they're my favourites. And new people come and layer that all the time. But there's people like Ricky Gervais, like some love or hate him. I'm an absolute massive fan of Ricky Gervais. I think he's exceptional. And anyone who says he isn't is just weird. That's my opinion. I just think everything about him is, I love the zero fucks. I love the way he doesn't care. I love the way he says what he wants. But I love the way it's also structured too, and it's sensible.
And that's his stand-up you like? I
like his stand-up, but I don't necessarily... I don't know. His stand-up's good. I think his stand-up is very good. I like the way I like the satire and the irony, but he's in a very unique position to sort of play those jokes.
Yeah.
He's got people coming just to see him, and that doesn't really work when you're on the open mic circuit.
You can't die on your ass when you've got your
audience. You can't just be fall on your sword of your own opinion just for the ironic joke of it, which is great, which he does brilliantly. But so I wouldn't even say necessarily he's my favourite comedian. I don't know who my favourite comedian is. I don't think I have a one favourite comedian, because there's times... Like I'll watch like a YouTube clip of Jimmy Carr, and Jimmy Carr is just a masterclass of comedy. You watch Jimmy Carr and go, I can't do that. I don't think I could ever do that. Or someone like Gary Delaney, you go, I don't think I could do that. Bang, bang, bang. Someone like Ricky Gervais, strangely, you go, I think I could do that.
It's because it's the guy rocking up on stage who's up having a chat with his mates, and he does the whole thing. He was inspired by people like Richard Pryor and Billy Connolly and George Carlin and stuff.
Yeah.
So they're the sort of people that come up with a couple of concepts and then just sort of work their way around it. But if you ever want to see the raw Ricky Gervais, you go to one of his warm-ups.
Yeah.
One of his, I think in America they call it a workshop.
Yeah.
Whereas a workshop here is like a lesson sort of learning thing. But so he does that. He does like loads of those. So by the time he gets to his arenas, he's performed to 10,000 people and all that sort of stuff.
He's polished.
And he calls it out. He said, these are the shit bits, and most of it is not going to make it to the final show.
Yeah.
So in some ways you're lucky because you're seeing all the shit bits and no one else is going to see them, and otherwise I've never seen him live, and
strangely me neither. I've always been too busy. But.
I don't think he's the greatest stand-up comedian out there. I really like his stuff. Obviously people like Carl Pilkington made him big time, and I'm a big fan of the stuff he does, and I like the sitcoms he did.
That's kind of where I sit with him. I don't necessarily have him up there as my favourite ever stand-up, because strangely stand-up comedy has not necessarily been on my complete radar. I've been a massive fan of comedy my whole life, massive fan of everything. But when I actually really think back to nitty gritty, it's not necessarily been stand up. Yeah. It's been every decent sketch show or something like, I don't know, like Man and Partridge, which is just legendary, and these really funny sitcoms, unlike The Office, which I'm still, I can quote you just about any single word from The Office because I'm that sad. But stand up comedy, I sort of really, as a child, if you like, say a child or young teen, the only real stuff I'd seen was someone like Lee Evans or Jack Dee or whatever was on telly, basically, and that was all I would have known.
Used to be the place, yeah. I mean, I like his stuff. I think Afterlife, so this later sitcom, was brilliant.
It's decent.
The only thing is, I've listened to his Ricky Gervais' Deadly Serious a few times, right? And pretty much his message that he's getting across in podcasts and wherever he talks is pretty much he's written a sitcom just to fit it all into one thing. So.
When you've listened to Deadly Serious, then you watch Afterlife, you realise there's loads of that in Afterlife. And I've listened to them all now. It's just released the most recent ones, 51 to 55. I've just listened to those. And but the minute it's all freedom of speech. It's proper.
But even the stuff with Carl Pilkington years back are in Afterlife. There's a bit where he's got he hates people being noisy when they're eating. Yeah. Like, so the bit with the milk, with the breast milk in Afterlife, that's a true story. He actually saw that happen. Yeah. Someone told him it happened. And that whole thing, he's basically living out one of his...
Because also back in Extras, he did that. He was out for a meal in a restaurant and someone was slurping.
That's right,
It's obviously... And it's a trait I've heard on his podcast he hates. So it's all coming out. But, so I mean, when he did Animals...
Yeah.
That was probably one of the biggest DVD ones, I think, around at the time. But generally, I haven't... I'm going to hold my hands up. I haven't, until much more recently, in recent years with things like Live at the Apollo coming on telly, maybe, I haven't really watched much.
Yeah.
And the only time I've really been out to see it is maybe like a big theatre one. You know, like I went to the O2 to see Michael McIntyre, for example, last year actually as a present. But really, I haven't seen much. But my earliest memory of it, I went with a friend to see. I want to say it's Jerry Sadowitz.
Okay.
And he's absolutely barking mad, doing magic and smut. You name it, and it was some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen in my life. But you couldn't. It was sort of that borderline old school kind of comedy where you're like, you couldn't say it.
Well,
now.
we're lacking that now. We are lacking. Like Milton Jones is probably the only one that around at the moment who's doing really silly stuff.
Yeah,
like
clean really kind of, family almost. Yeah.
And he's not my favourite comedian. I don't really. His stuff doesn't really resonate that much with me.
Saw him actually randomly.
Really?
Yeah, it was good. Yeah.
This is where I started naming comedians, saying I just like them, and then you go like, oh, they're my favourite comedian.
Milton Jones isn't my favourite. But it was the awe of Milton Jones is being in a room of people when he's making them laugh, and it twists your brain. I don't necessarily want to aspire to be like Milton Jones.
Well, I appreciate how brilliant he is at comedy, but I just don't. It doesn't really resonate with me, and I'm sure in a room with loads of people laughing is very, very infectious.
I don't know about you, but I like to wince and go, oh, okay. That's coming out in mine more. Like I had a friend,
awkward comedy, you mean?
A little bit like, right, not like, oh my god, you shouldn't say that. A bit like, oh, I wasn't expecting him to say that. Okay. And I've sort of, I've always been. I've always liked dark comedy. I've always liked, trying to push the boundaries. And I think when you think back to all the extreme comedians that and some of the stuff that Jimmy Carr says, for example, you just can't.
He still says them.
And he still says them, and he gets away with it. And I've never quite laughed like you laugh at stuff you're not really supposed to laugh at, but I don't care.
So I can't remember exactly the material you did on your first gig, but how much did you say in the last? How long have you been going? About 6 months.
6 months. Yeah. It was just gone 6 months now.
Right. Yeah. So you've been going for about 6 months. So then, how much has your material changed over those 6 months?
Yeah, it's I'd say it's changed quite a bit. There's some things that haven't worked that I put in the bank that I think I can make work later, and I think that as time's gone on, I've realised just how much what used to I would think would fill a couple of minutes is now a line.
Right. Okay.
So I'm sort of getting to that stage where I can start piecing it all together just to make a decent 5 or 10 here and there, which would have been loads of stuff in the in the past. Sorry.
Yeah.
And I'd say the premise of it's similar. Like a lot of the feedback I get is a bit like, I don't like the term dad jokes because that's not what I do, but people compare me to the dad or the uncle who gets up at a wedding and doesn't give a shit and just tells jokes. And like that's what someone said to me like the other night when I was hosting. Good jokes, I've got decent laughs, and I was trying out material, whatever, homing it in. But I think people do get the whole sense that they don't think, oh, this guy's going to then follow me home afterwards because he's a weirdo. Like, do you know what I mean? There's that, like, you could get someone saying what I say in one way or another.
Oh yeah, I could probably find a comedian that's out there telling your jokes and
go,
like,
does he mean that? Whereas I obviously don't. Whatever I say, I tell jokes. Tell a joke about wanking or whatever you do, in public or something, and people go, "Of course he doesn't do that, but isn't that funny?" It gets a laugh, and it's a bit lowbrow. But when you're MCing, that kind of stuff does work, and especially when you layer it up, you're not going to expect that kind of thing. I mean, I've got a particular line in one of mine that always works now. I say one of the best things about having children is better fight in public and no one knows it's you. And everyone thinks that's funny. And I said, but I get cocky. It doesn't turn out with wanking. And so it turns out it doesn't work with wanking, right?
Right.
And so you get this whole sort of bit of a laugh, and everyone goes, I wasn't expecting that. And so when you fire that one out, that's a good one to have even between an act if you need to lift it up if you're hosting a night.
Yeah.
But it works great with all my stuff about my kids. So I don't know. It's the sort of thing I wouldn't say to a customer in my business. But even if I did, they'd go, obviously that's a joke.
Yeah.
And not think, does he actually go to the park and, try this out? Some people you go, probably does.
Wouldn't surprise me if he did.
Well, there you go. I look a bit suspicious.
One of the common things to do when you first start is also set up like your own comedy night. So you do Ben Aveling's Comedy Stew. Yeah. Was that to get more experience in stand-up? Or? Completely. And to network. I mean, I've never been shy about the fact it was done to try and boost my route in. Like, I've always wanted to, because of what I do for day job anyway, I'm quite used to doing stuff like that, events or, I've always run off my own steam and it's never a problem. So, and I had a good working relationship with some venues and such that I already deal with. And like at home, for example, where I live, I've got our family own a pub as well. So it's really easy to do, basically. And so from there on, I thought to myself, I'm just going to do that. And it's a really good way. I learned very, very, very quickly that hosting was a good way to get new material. Try out new material. And if you're confident enough, it writes itself a bit on the night. A lot of like that I talked about the wanking bit, that came out in the middle of a gig. I didn't think of that in the car. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. That was like my brain goes, here you are, give him this one. And it worked. That's how most of it, in my opinion, comes to me. On those nights where the pressure's off, like at first laughs, half of what I did was referring to the last person that came on. Yeah. And actually, I had a cold that day and I was actually nearly going to pull out and do the gig because I was really ill. And then it gave me an inspiration to make a few jokes up about that. And so I sometimes a good couple of minutes of on the day stuff I'll just make up before I go on or between acts. And that's where that's been massively beneficial. But also, because you're hosting your own gig, you can give opportunities to other people, and actually it's made it a lot more easier for me to get gigs because now they've all seen me, and 9 times out of 10 I don't have to send videos. I don't really have to properly apply to most people now because they go, oh yeah, well I've seen Ben a lot, or yeah, he's all right, or I'll give him a shot because he give me a shot. And already I've met people who you probably wouldn't have met had you just been Joe Bloggs on the circuit. Yeah, that's true. So one of the things you've got really into is MCing. Tell us a bit about that. I don't know why. When I started stand-up, it very, very quickly occurred to me how hard it was, which is a stupid thing to say, but in a way, I've always been naturally confident. And in your podcast, I hear this a lot. The whole sort of the 10 years, the 10,000 hours, or whatever. Yeah, there's all this thing. But part of me thinks a lot of that's just the age bracket too. Because I've had years of doing this kind of stuff, but not specifically stand-up. So for my job, I'm always the one that does the talks. I'm always the one that hosts the quiz at the pub, or I'm always the one that does that. And I've always been very sure of myself, and it's never been a problem. So I think I've had a good proportion of those years without realising it. Yeah, that's true. The second I got up on stage, it wasn't an issue to do that in front of people. And I think that's a massive part of it. Really all you're doing is then you just got to get the material right. But I very quickly realised that I had that natural confidence, but actually I was going to have to work quite hard at this. So actually MCing, strangely, is a bit of a comfort blanket. When I have a bit of a rough patch, I go, that's all right, I'm MCing that night. Yeah. Pressure's off completely. Try and even use some of the gold to make it better. Polish it, and throw in a few bits of fun. And actually, so the MCing is sort of a good way of
I sort of naturally fell into it. It's sort of one of those things where it felt very me to MC, and I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but I could be quite happy just about. I'm sure in very, very soon I'll be at a level with MCing that I'll be able to kind of just progress further. I don't feel nervous about MCing.
He's MC'd mine, and he did a great job.
Thank you.
So I felt that you needed me to then give you that affirmation, because if you said it yourself, then it would have been a bit arsey. But I've said it now, so it's fine. I can cut that bit out.
I mean, regardless of what the quality of my standard, to me it feels comfortable. Yeah. It feels like, do you want to MC this, Ben? Yeah, actually, that for me, I've got to be there all night, but I get to see a whole bill, which I like as well. Well, it makes me stay.
With MCing, it is a good way to get paid quite quickly. So it's not the most desirable job. I mean, I've been in performed the location we're recording this, the Portland Dance, before, and it's the home of Mirth Control. And big gigs like that, when you got absolute pros there and you're MCing, it can be a very daunting task, because the whole night is kind of on the MC, and it's a very unforgiving job. So if you can do it and you can do it well, then it's a way of getting paid to do comedy. And what do your family think to you doing comedy?
My wife is amazing. She doesn't listen either, so I mean it.
Okay.
She doesn't really listen to podcasts. She's never actually listened to a podcast in her life, but she's been brilliant, because when people say that your other half, when it comes to comedy, she's completely my other half. Nearly every single thing we've ever found funny has just been stuff we've talked about. And so when I'd say, I've done a joke about that thing that happened to us, or there's a bloke that died on the farm, terrible story but a hilarious joke, she knows it. And so she's like, oh, you've done that, have you? And then I'll sometimes go, I want a really silly song as a topper to this joke. This is the kind of thing, can you think of one? And she'll come up with it. And she's incredibly good at that, and she's been really, really supportive, because I think she very quickly knew that it was my kind of thing. And she's almost got this sort of awe and respect that she goes, I just wouldn't do it, so isn't that amazing? My main aim is, as I progress through my, hopefully keep going, I'm fully intending on keeping going and progressing and hopefully getting paid for it one day, and who knows, that's the aim. Genuine aim is that she'll be able to come into it more, because she loves comedy. And having more justification financially to do comedy, my wife will be able to come into it as well, because she's incredibly funny. And if we've got to start writing shows or sketches and stuff, she'll come into her own. But she hasn't got to be in front of the camera or in front of a microphone. She can come up with stuff. She's got a completely different angle on things, which is really good for me. So I'll go, I can't think of this. But I did a panel show recently. And it was called it just so happened it was about a day in history, and it turned out the day we got, you can look up whatever you like, and I chose O.J. Simpson trial, and it was a lot of stuff, and I wrote some bits and bobs down about it, and then I said to my wife just like the night or so before, I said, I'm not quite happy with this. Normally she can't help because it's in here or whatever, and I've got to go and deliver it, whereas she said, well, shall we do some more research together, structure it? And then she goes, she researched it all. We researched the whole thing, which is much more her style. I'm lazy, so I'll be like, I'll go bang, 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 bang. There's my jokes for tonight, and I'll mix it in with some other stuff. Can I do that on my way in? Yeah, that's and I'm getting better at that. The behind the scenes work now, but she's very, very good at that. She will spend all night writing and researching, and she researched this whole thing about O.J. Simpson, and it turned out we structured it and we went all through it, and I added some jokes and it went brilliantly. So I think in the future, with more of a name behind you, there's more she could get involved too, because I think she'll be really good in comedy. My other parts of my family were at my first gig. They're like, oh, at last. Oh, really? yeah. They weren't like, oh, you're nuts or nothing like that. It was very much like my aunt, my stepdad, my uncle were there. I just sat there. Well, this is great. My brother ringing me on the night, and my mum's like, oh, I can't believe you're doing it. And then I've got mates going at last, and so actually it's been a complete like, oh right. No one's ever said you should be in comedy. You should do stand-up comedy. The second I said I was going to do it, I had a few people like more current friends who know me now, who are a bit like, oh, maybe they wouldn't have suspected I've always been a joke teller, but I'm not that. I don't know. I don't give it off much these days. I'm always busy and whatever. But people that know me from years ago, family and close family and friends, are like, yeah, yeah, I can see it. Great. When's your... And there's, they're desperate to come to the shows and things. So it's been pretty cool, if I'm honest. And
I haven't invited my family to any of my gigs yet.
Really?
My partner's even stopped coming to my gigs.
I find there's a mix. My wife's never seen me, but that's purely logistical because she's always got the kids, and I'll time a gig when a day I'm in the area somewhere or whatever. But that's not for me not wanting her to see it. But my family have seen it quite a few times, and I'm not bothered about even dropping the C-bomb if I had to. It don't really matter in front of family. They sort of know how I am.
Yeah, if you don't say it, they might be surprised.
Yeah.
So, out of your friends and your mates as you grew up, were you always the joker then?
Yeah, I'd have said so. Pretty much. Yeah, that's straight up. Always just taking the piss. And I was always sent out of class, but I was always sent out at school. I was always sent out of class because I'd rear the teacher up. My problem was, I was when you get your school report, very bright child, but if only you put that effort into his schoolwork and not making people laugh. And that was me in a nutshell. And I still do it now. I still go, how much work have I got to do? It could be an incredible amount of work or not. What have I got to do my job and survive and whatever? And the rest of my time is spent doing stuff that's pissing about or enjoying myself. That's literally, and I've had years and years and years where I've had no time to enjoy myself. I've just been busy. But I'm always striving to go, right, now I can be stupid and mess about. And I've always been the same. I've always joking around at stupid puns, with the kids. But at school, it was always rearing up the teachers cleverly, and they hated it. I was always a bit like, I've always been a bit, what's the best way to put it? Never start a fight, but always finish it. So if the teacher picked on me, I'd be like, all right, are we having this out? Right, in that case, I make the whole class laugh with a brutal joke or something about them. Or one of my favourite ones ever was I got sent out once for something completely random, and I turned around and said, I thought you were different, miss. And and I sort of played it up, and you've watched the black hole take them up, and I used to sort of get a bit addicted to, could I defeat the teacher?
Just a sociopath, mate.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But I've always been happy in my bubble. Don't burst me. Just let me get on with my thing, and I'm happy. The second you sort of drag me off course and start wagging your finger at me, especially at school, I was like, oh, brakes on. I was quite happy. Why are you ruining my fun day?
So it's comedy been a bit of a learning curve in that sense, because
massively
you get the worst kind of message that it didn't land in comedy. So if it doesn't go right, you just get a silent room.
Yeah,
which is your heart drops, and then there's no way of getting it back. I mean, I'm not trying to compare your childhood and your school time with what you do now, but I mean, how has it affected you when things haven't gone right on stage?
It's made me decide that I try and record them every time. So it makes me think whether it works or not. Sometimes you'll agree, when it doesn't land doesn't mean it doesn't work.
Not always.
So I always have that in the back of my mind and go, I do get that instant sort of like, oh right, was that not good? And I'll address that instantly to the room by saying, oh, I sounded funnier in the van, or something like that.
That is an easy way to get a laugh.
Yeah.
And if you're there just to get a laugh, that is an instant. As a comic, the minute I hear someone say that, I know that they're just covering up the fact that they've just told a shit joke or one that's not landed.
That's it.
The other thing you got to be mindful of is when you go to a room that's half empty, you need to go and do a full room, because a half empty room, if you've got quiet laughers, then you're going to have quiet laughers. You're going to get them in every audience. But
I'm quite comfortable with one that doesn't land. Comfortable enough that when I say that, it's very much like a whatever. That's fine. Chances are it's not one. It's not one. If it's one that always gets laughs, I usually go, that's all right. It's just tonight, or maybe I skipped it. Maybe I missed a beat. Maybe I didn't set it up right. Sometimes I forget. Sometimes you forget the word. The en route word that you need, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
That happens. But generally the tumbleweed moments, they come, but I take notice of them, and but in your heart usually if something is funny.
Yeah, that's true. But it's a slog. But then when it does work, it feels amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it does, and I just think you do get the times where you go, I thought that was funnier than it was. But also, I don't know if your other guest is the same, but sometimes the thing you find funniest isn't what goes the best. So like if I listen back, like I was saying earlier, like the throwaway comments or the things that just land in your head when you're emceeing or something get a bigger laugh than my normal joke. And they're the sort of things that I think a gold dust. I reckon there's a part of your brain that you don't know about that just every now and then just throws you something and you catch it. Because I can think and think and think as much as you like about a joke forever. I can drive hours in the car. Yeah, I get on the stage, stand up or emceeing, and within 5-10 seconds it starts to come in. And my wife was, when we were doing the OJ Simpson thing, she was like, we said, well, let's time it. And so I was reading it for her, she was timing it. And she says, I'll throw some stuff in. And I was like, but the switch isn't on. I can't sit in my house like it's almost impossible. I can't describe it. And unless you've done it, you don't know what I mean. Like, when you go on stage, something turns on that's different. Mate of mine, Adam, says he sounds like I'm like a TV show presenter. My voice changes. Right. Because I'll be chatting with you and then I get on there, hey, so, good evening, kind of thing. And not as accentuated, obviously, but I can't help it. I don't know I'm doing it. It's just, it's perform time now. And then when you're in perform mode, it sort of feeds you stuff.
If you want that little bit you did there with the presenter voice as a soundbite to send to promoters and like the ITV, I can always...
This is it.
I can always cut that out and give it to you as like
10%.
A show reel package.
Yeah.
So what's your next step then? I mean, how often are you gigging?
Well, I'm trying to do it as much as possible. I'm lucky if it's once a week.
Oh, really?
Once a week's usual. Sometimes a couple of times a week. Yeah. I've got quite a few this month, actually, so I'll be doing it more than once a week this month. But it's just hard to fit it in. I've had spells I've done a couple in a week, or 3 maybe, but it's definitely a good cluster in a month. I had a spell where I had a big busy spell in the shop at work, so I was working all hours and couldn't do as much. But
just in case the listeners don't know what your shop is, you can plug it now.
Oh, great! Radmore Farm Shop, Victoria Avenue, Cambridge. It's the best food shop in town.
Yeah, and their Scotch eggs are incredible.
Yeah, pretty good.
Their sausage meat is amazing.
Yeah.
You can be you can be a sponsor of the podcast.
I know. There you go, sponsor. Yeah. Sponsor you with my meat, but use that as you will. Yeah, I might misuse that. You never know. I've never swung to the other side, but. Do you know what? Maybe for you I will. This has made this conversation very awkward now. It's all right. It's this big sort of phallic-looking speakerphone here as well, isn't it?
I haven't got a picture of it, mate. This is a podcast. They haven't got any reference to where we're sitting. We're actually sitting in the green room to the Portland Arms, which is a really amazing pub in Cambridge, and right near your farm actually. So you can have a pint, go and get some pork, and go home. Anyway, you got really busy with working, and
so it cut down my gig time. And when I hosted yours for you that night, that was actually in the thick of it. I was really busy then, but I was here and it was great. And in the last few months, I'm playing it down. I
think that same night you had to go and do a drop off late evening.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I sort of work all the time, random hours, but I managed to sort of balance it and fit it all in. But I absolutely love it, and I've done quite a lot of gigs now. Everyone's annoyed at me because I don't keep count.
Right, okay, yeah.
So I'm not a count keeper. I've done 20, 30, probably 30 something now.
Just say, when you send a message to a promoter, just send 30 plus.
Yeah.
I haven't counted mine either, but I know it's into the hundreds now.
Yeah, I mean, it might be more. Because I do...
That's true.
I do jump on them and go, yeah, all right. And then there's my own nights as well, and they sometimes count for more, I swear, as well. I don't really count them in the nights, but I start warming to certain venues that are easier to get to, or you can guarantee a decent crowd or whatever. There's a few that are like, don't go there again. Generally, there's a few London ones I'm thinking about going to. I did one London one not that long ago, and it was pretty bad. And it wasn't even me. I think it was everybody. There's a couple of comedians there who I know on from the circuit that I know are good, and they kill rooms and they won't get nothing, so it made me feel a bit better. I just think that, from my initial experience there, it's just a bit like, it's a long way to go for 5 minutes for nothing to land.
That's true.
That's my opinion on it. So, but also, they fill the bills up, in my experience, with a lot of people, And gigging around and outside in Cambridge, or I do things like I'm going like Leighton Buzzard, I would go to St Albans, I'd go to the Glass Eye Guys, which is a decent night, by the way, if you're a cracking night.
They've been on the podcast, as heard on the podcast, the three of them, Aaron Spalding, Louis Green and Danny Mark. Great comedians. They do great nights in Suffolk.
They are amazing. Decent. I mean, the one I did was a Felix Day gig at the Coppers Bar.
That's right.
And that was as good an audience as you'd ever get. The thing what was good about that gig was that the crowd were there, they're laughing before they got there. You could tell. They're in a good spirit, good amount of drink in them, and not undermining the comedy because everyone was decent on the night, but it just helps you settle into the night when people laugh. And when you say good evening in a silly way, they giggle and straight away. Whereas when you go to other places, when you've just got a room full of comedians, oddly, some comedians, they're just not very sociable or interested in laughing at all, or they're going through the set in their head not listening. So you know what I mean? They're in the zone ready to go on. Yeah. So if you just got a room with a couple of crowd and the rest of comedians, nothing lands sometimes. And that's more likely when you're going to gig in London. From the amount of them, and there's a few that I've been suggested to go to, which I'm looking forward to. But whereas out around everyone I do, it's still quite short on crowd numbers, but you still get a few regulars. And the best thing about it is when you meet people, other comedians on the circuit. You mentioned someone like Chris Norton Walker. He was really interesting to chat to. I mean, he headlined mine back in Northants, and he absolutely smashed it. People were just crying, laughing, and you know, it's nice to see that sort of thing. You don't see it if you're not really in the nitty gritty. And what I love most about the circuit at the moment, there's a lot of people who I look at them and I go, regardless of my progress, I'll go, one day I'm going to see you on the telly and I'm going to tell my wife, I met him, because you see there's a few, definitely now, who are just next in line that we've all met already, who we're gigging with, learning from, and also the how generous everyone is with help and experience and little touches. I thought it'd be a bit more competitive than it is. I think in a way it's competitive because everyone's got to make a living. You know, everyone's... You know, don't knock the bucket if there's a few quid going type thing. You know, everyone understands that. Put to one side, everyone is super, super helpful. And I wasn't expecting that. I'm used to being sort of in business where you're on your own. You've got to make your way. I wasn't expecting the amount of advice that you just get absolutely swarmed with from everybody. And some people are brutal in a good way. They mean it well. And if you don't listen, or only a fool changes their mind, you know. And if you don't listen to it, you're just sort of on the downward spiral anyway. And I've learnt loads from just gigging with other people.
So you're probably at the stage now where you got your dynamite 5 to 10 minutes. Where are you going with your comedy now? Then, what do you want to do with it?
I want to make that 5 or 10 minutes better. And better. I don't think it's going fine. It's going good, but I'm also thinking stuff all the time. I want to start. I'm not really. I don't know. I want to start feeling like I'm good enough to do it. So, like, at the minute, I still go, I'm not quite happy with it. This needs to change. This needs to change. And I would like to start going, well, there's a banker 10 I've got, and then I want to start just adding onto that with new material, and I want to have the time to start writing more, spend more time finding a proper process that's not just bullet points that lead into another bullet point, which is sort of how I write at the minute. So I just have an idea, I write it down on my phone before I forget it. And that's enough of a trigger for me to, especially when you're MCing, when you've got a little bit more leeway, to throw it in. I remember, like, if you look at the list on my phone, I've got things like extra virgin olive oil as a bullet point, and window cleaner died in a bucket. Do you know what I mean? It's silly bullet points like this that looks like crazy bollocks, but I know what that runs into. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think that to make it better and to progress further, I need to have it all on maybe even little cards. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. But go, well, there's that joke, and then make it really work on its structure to a level where you can start really hitting it out properly. And that's really what I want to go. I want to just carry on where I haven't got any massive aspirations at the minute, but I would like to sort of gig everywhere, everywhere that I wanted to have gigged at. And meet everyone I want to meet, still enjoying it, but knowing that you're up there. Because for me, I always like to try my best and be really good at something, and it will really annoy me if I feel like I'm not, and I'll just keep chipping away at it. At the minute, I'll go somewhere and I'll see someone smash it, and I'll enjoy it, but it will annoy me to a level like I'll go home and go, I've got to work on this. Mine's not as good as that.
I see.
Yeah, all the time. So, like, I remember I went to Suffolk Punch.
Yeah.
And only a few gigs in, and I did all right. It wasn't bad at all, actually. It was fine. It was good. And then there's a guy there called Adam Bromley. Do you know Adam Bromley?
Yeah, I know him very well.
He was very good. And Ali Warwood.
Yep.
She did an Edinburgh preview. And I remember driving home that night after watching those two. I did it with a friend of mine called Adam as well. And I remember driving home that night going, I'm nowhere near that. Do you know what I mean by that? And I was like, okay, I thought I was getting somewhere.
But that's a really good lesson to learn, because if you think you're great, having that moment of realising that actually, like, Ali Warwood is one of the best on the circuit.
Yeah.
And, like, you know, she doesn't do it as regularly as she used to, but she's incredible.
That's what it is for me. So I'm like, I've always been like the same. I've always gone, right, who's the best? And just try and be as good as
Well, you're never going to be Ali Warwood.
No, that's it. But so
or Adam Bromley, he's very different. He does very sort of middle class kind of stereotype stuff.
And it was brilliant. But I just remember thinking, they're not thinking.
Yes, exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I remember thinking they're not thinking.
But they still go up with notes, though, mate. I mean,
That's true.
I've never seen Adam go up with notes, actually.
He did that time, actually, as it happened. Yeah.
Okay.
It was, yeah.
So they're still trying to try stuff out. I mean, I've done backyard. No, sorry, not backyard. Have done backyard, but I've done downstairs at the King's Head at Crouch End a few times, and like every Thursday there is a professional comedian there rallying out new stuff in 5 minutes.
Yeah,
you know, so that will never go away. That kind of trying to like warming stuff up and trying to work stuff out.
Do you find this though? You sort of chase this, because like I've always been the same in my work life too. So I've always been like, well, I wanted to have my own business, do my own thing. Always have done. So I did whatever I could to do that. What could I do to do that? And everything I do now has just been a process of that. Then you sort of get to the level where you go, oh, I've sort of. Yeah, I'm pretty good at that now. That's fine. And then it's the same with the comedy. But I'm always going to be chasing that. You see, but I don't beat myself up. I just go, that's good. That's really good. I've got to be as good as that. That's that. And until I feel in that company, I'll strive to it. But when I get there, I'll end up looking up anyway. You know, I'm always aspiring. To push and push and push.
So do you think that helping? So do you think that it will help to get more stage time? And maybe that's the first thing to get right?
It's so done, isn't it, in comedy podcasts to say just keep gigging. Yeah. But it's hands down the only way I find I get the gold.
Yeah.
It's really, it gets rid of the ums. It gets rid of the waffle. It stops the way you hold the microphone. The more you do it, it all irons out every crease. And I didn't realise that, especially at the level I'm at the moment, most of what I'm aspiring to be will be fixed by consistently thinking and writing, brackets, and forward slash, if you like, getting on stage and doing it.
He's trying to be grammatically
correct, because I'm thinking like I'm typing. But for me, those two things are where I severely lack discipline, is constantly gigging, which is going to have to happen, you know, much more frequently than I do, especially a spell. But it's the time at home staring out a window with a pad open that you need to do, you know?
Yeah. Like,
you need to have those moments of, right, I've got to sit here for an hour and just think of that. And that's where I don't have time at the moment. So I think the second I start getting, I've got a paid gig coming up, you know, which is good. It's good progress.
Yeah.
And then obviously I'm getting a bit of money from some of my nights here and there. So it's starting. It's definitely starting. And then once you start getting paid, it starts to get momentum there. The second I start earning money for it, the more I can justify the time in doing it. If I can earn even a little bit, 50 quid for going out somewhere, which is quite a lot now, like on the comedy circuit as it is, that's enough for me to go, well, I'm going to spend today writing then. And whereas today I'm going to take 50 quid in my business instead. Do you know what I mean? It's just the way it is. So I'm finding a happy balance with it at the moment. But for me, it's just to start getting it to a different level where I can go, yeah, I'm good enough to be on that bill and feel like I am. Sounds stupid, but when you're on, if you're punching above your weight or not. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? If you're on something, you go, God, I'm lucky to be on that. And that's. I mean, I'm always quite humble with that, but I always like to think one day. But when I get to that level, then I always look above that anyway. So I'm just you'll
never be good enough, mate.
No, that's basically I'll never be good enough.
You're always going to be shit. I think we should leave the podcast there. Just leave the end.
Always going to be shit. But it's been really strange. I don't know the best way to say it, but it's been nothing like I expect. I didn't know what to expect, so obviously that's fine. But I didn't know what to expect, and I've seen some people who are brilliant as well. Like I'm sat there on an open mic night, and you'll be like, I watched Live at the Apollo last night, and they weren't as funny as you are. There's times, but I mean, maybe it's just certain comedy resonates with you.
Yeah,
then others do.
But real comedy is on the circuit, though. I mean,
I agree.
It's on the open mic circuit and in the comedy clubs, and that's where I'm not saying like tours are also the same, but I mean TV comedy stuff that's been honed. I mean that I don't know how much they manufacture like Live at the Apollo. I don't know, but I mean again, I would if someone turned around to me tomorrow and said like you're going on Live at the Apollo, I'd come up with my best stuff and kill it.
Yeah.
Right? Of course you would, but it doesn't. But now Live at the Apollo is not quite the level of what it used to be. Right?
That's right.
So getting on that doesn't mean
quite.
Yeah. So
I mean, I find that when it comes to things like that, is my.
But then again, I say that Rosie Jones and Kerry Godliman have been on there recently, and they're amazing comedians.
I like Kerry Godliman. I haven't seen the other one.
Rosie Jones, yeah, she's fantastic.
Well, I don't know about you, but I find that because my sort of style isn't necessarily that quirky, I would say I'm probably in the bracket of mainstream. I'm not like weird or dark or different. It's in that sense. So I'm not like a wild card. So I think that the more I progress, let's say you go to Live at the Apollo and you're compared to an open mic night, you've got a massive chance the whole room's just going to sound like laughter.
Yeah,
more than you have in a little room.
And the microphones will be placed in the right places.
Yeah, and there's all this stuff. So you just think like if you've got a room of 10 people and 8 of them are comedians. And who are, like I said earlier, in their heads anyway, or they're just not in a very funny mood. And 2 of the people are, are the audience, and the promoter's usually pretty supportive and they'll laugh away. But you think that, or you go into a stadium and there's arena, there's 10,000 people, then the same ratio, that's still even at worst, you're still going to have 2,000 people laughing their heads off what you just said. And I don't know about you, the second that happens, just completely puts the icing on top and then just relaxes you. I think that it's just the open mics, what we're doing now is just the rite of passage, because I've never, ever, ever considered getting on a massive stage and it dying. It's something about it. Like, people are laughing before you get on at a comedy show.
You'd hope so, because you've probably had a very good MC.
Exactly. They're sort of laughing before you come on. You got, like at Live at the Apollo, they get someone who's pretty decent or famous to do it. And let's be honest, if you're signed up and paid and invested in a comedy night, you're laughing about, before you've even got in the door. You're in that mood. You've had a couple of drinks in the entrance hall. You get there, the MC, like you said, livens them up. And even if they're mediocre, they're in good spirits. They're not sort of dragged to a room that they would have just been having a drink in a pub anyway. Or you're just interrupting their book club. Do you know what I mean? Or whatever. So I think just by default, there's a lot of people on the circuit now who would still get on that stage and still kill it. And I think that's sort of like how I feel, that in time you'll end up getting to that level where you'll probably be better and better and better for doing the rite of passage stuff. But when you get to that sort of higher level, you just get laughs for less.
Yeah, that's true.
Do you know what I mean? You could go. You see people walk on stage. I can't think of an example, but a comedian who we all know, someone that's very famous, can just go up and say, "Hello" in a funny voice. And everyone's like, "Ha ha ha!" He said, "Oh, I ate my breakfast this morning." People are like, "Brilliant!" Do you know what I mean? Like they just say anything and they laugh.
Yeah.
Whereas you're really having to work hard on the open mic circuit.
Well, even in comedy clubs, to be honest. I mean,
yeah, that's true. I've been to
like doing like the backyard comedy club, which is a really good room, and you do very bad to fail in that room. Like they are genuinely there for comedy and they love it. And then again downstairs at the King's Head, they're quite a polite audience, a bit like Cambridge audiences. Yeah. Again, lovely room, mirth control. When I was here, they left the aircon on all day. It was in the middle of winter. And they were freezing. People had their coats on still, so you're never going to warm an audience up in the literal sense.
Well, I did a gong show in Leicester, and that was some of the best and worst experience yet, because I did that and it went quite well. And I got to the final, which was good, with no red cards at all. But it was quite tough because when I read the review back, there's a review of it as well, and that was quite picking on what you said. But also, I also didn't expect to get to the final whatsoever. So when you're in the final, you've got to have another minute, and I give them everything at the time, all my gold. I was like 5 minutes of brilliance, whatever, this is the best I've got. And thinking, I wasn't many gigs in, it's quite new, first gong show, and I was up against some people that had done loads of gong shows. And then I got to the final and I was like, bloody, I had no idea, I never ever thought. And then I just ended up going on the front with nothing, and that just terrible. But it made me think to myself, well, actually, if you've got a good room who you warm to, that's where MCing for me comes in. So if I'm really unsure, it's a tough room, or like it's a gong show or something, but you've got people out for the night, they're not just randoms, they've come out for a comedy show, you've got a chance if you can get up there and give it a bit of personality, even if you're not as funny. So that was like a tiny room, but that's an example of what I was just saying, that they were up for a laugh. They would come out to watch a gong show because they want to see people have fun, but maybe see people fail or whatever. So I feel that there's opportunities there to, but it's just so tough in certain places. But the gong show was an incredible learning curve, and it made me think you got to be much sharper, and it made me much punchier. So it was good and bad. It was like it knocked me a bit. I was like, I've got to do more work on this, but it made me get a tight 5. So it forced you to. Yeah.
So you said that the comedy world has been nothing like you expected it to be.
No.
So if you were to look back at Ben Aveling first starting off, first thinking about going into comedy, what would you tell him?
Well, that's a good question.
Thank you.
Don't expect it to be easy.
You expected it
I expected it to be easy. Arrogant, isn't it? But it's not necessarily an arrogant thing to think. I didn't know anything about it, so it was naive in the sense that I just had no idea about any of it. Literally, the first laughs I heard about through a customer, Nessie Ward.
Yeah.
She's a customer of mine. And I don't even remember how it even came up. But in the shop, I spend a lot of my time just telling jokes to customers, just joking around. And I think I said to her once, I'm thinking about getting into... It's completely random out of nowhere. So I owe Nessie Ward a lot for... she sort of was my complete in route to the comedy circuit, because I had nothing. I never heard of any of it.
Nessie Ward was the first guest on this podcast as well, and she runs an amazing night at Wine Gums, which is the first Saturday every month, and that's at the University Centre in town.
Yeah, and so she
was the grad pad in town.
She was instrumental in getting me started. She gave me loads of names of people, and including yourself, because you'd started the Boathouse one, and things like this. And she was just constantly sort of saying to me about these things. And I think that, would I have done anything different? Probably not, because I think that you have to fail to learn. I don't think you learn from positive stuff. I don't think you'd ever learn if it all goes well. I think that after my first one, I got the buzz and you get hooked. After the second one, I went, avoid those nights. But then I think, like I said, I really, really realised, like I said, at that night at Suffolk Punch with Ali Warwood and Adam Bromley, I went, yeah, I've got some work to do here. That's when I really went. And so then that's when I learned for myself. So I would have told myself that when I first started. Don't expect it to be easy.
Don't expect it to be easy.
Just don't expect it to be easy. I think I'd also sort of I don't know. It's a tough one. It's a real tough question, isn't it?
Listen to the Comedians Out League podcast.
Yeah,
that's also a really good start because you are speaking to people that have been in the game for a while or haven't been, and I think that's fair enough. I hate saying like what advice would you give to anyone because it's always going to be get up and gig and do it.
Well, I'd say one. A guy I've been chatting to a lot, a good friend of mine, and it's all through comedy. He did it for a long period of time and had to stop, and he's just sort of started back up again. And so he's got a real good insight into it, and so he would sort of give me lots of advice, and it was stuff that I didn't even notice I was doing, like moving, flicking the mic, and moving the mic away, and all these things. I'd say you can tell someone who's really new by how they use the microphone. And that's something maybe I would tell myself straight away is don't move the mic. I don't know. I was sort of talking like this, but still holding the microphone, hands moving and moving around too much and trying to perform too much. And I think that the cliche of being yourself, I'm every gig becoming more comfortable and becoming more like we're just chatting. That's what I want to do. I'm not up there to be an act. I want people to just think Ben's funny. This is what I'm like. And that's for me. It has to be some air of truth to it, or definitely something I've come up with, and definitely like an air of truth. I don't like silly jokes. You can't help that. They're neither truthful nor lies. They're just a quip. But I don't like if it's a story. Generally, it has to have happened to me, and I've embellished on it. Like the Facebook trolls, the bloke dying on the farm, which is a particularly good, funny ones, or ones about my children or whatever. I've obviously added stuff for comic effect, but it has to have sort of happened. I don't like. I don't know. It's strange, isn't it? I feel like I just have to be myself. I would feel uncomfortable.
It's important. It's important when it comes to telling stories and being one of those comics because people get to know you as a person rather than the jokes you're telling. So there is kind of a barrier between a one-liner comedian and the audience because there naturally is going to be because they're not disclosing personal information about themselves, whereas when you're telling true stories you're giving something and there's an element of respect from the audience because they know that you're talking about real things. But I think that's great advice. Don't expect it to be easy because it isn't, and particularly as you move up the ladder, and I've had a few of gone to a couple of the pro nights now and stuff, and it gets harder because you start worrying a lot more because when you go to the pro nights there's a lot more at stake. I would love to just be able to sit in a box for 5 years, right, practicing, and then just emerge fully formed. But you have to go through the slog. You have to go through, dying on your ass. I mean, I did your gig in the middle of the day. It was not in the middle of the day. It was the night England.
In the middle of that football match. Wasn't it?
And I found that really tough.
It was a tough room though that night.
I went from gig to gig. I went from your one and I didn't feel like it went well. Went over to Big Deal Comedy, great night. Jason Stamp been on the podcast, as heard on the Comedians Out League podcast. I'm just plugging that too. Listen back. I can't remember what episode it is, but it's a bloody good episode.
It's a few back. I listened to it.
Yeah, I think it's 25. I think one of those. Great episode, and went to Big Deal, and it was a completely different room. Everyone loved it, warm room, and everything else. But when you've been heckled by a football match and people shouting out about a game, that's really difficult because
it was tough.
Because actually, where you're standing when you're in that room in the shed in Waterman, amazing little room to do comedy, one of the best I think in the area. But you've got a window next to where the football is, and so you can really hear it vividly.
Yeah.
But with the doors closed, the the audience can't really hear it. So you're referring to a football game that they can't really hear.
It was June the 6th. It was D-Day, wasn't it? I remember
That's
that.
right.
And I remember thinking that night, it was terribly noisy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was so and I was a bit annoyed. And straight away...
There's some great food, though.
Yeah, there's some good food there, yeah. Some good sausages.
Pretty much every night that you'll ever see Ben at, there will be food.
Yeah, we sort food out. I randomly, would you believe, never eat it, but I sort it out. Yeah. But which you wouldn't believe. But yeah, that night I remember thinking that football match put me off. And so I'm possibly at fault as well, because I don't think that night I gave the room my best either. And and it was quite quiet because of the football, I wonder, as well. I think maybe we didn't get many people out, so it was a quieter room surrounded by noise as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, and half the room were comedians.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's really tough when it's like that. And one of the hardest things I find that I've had to get over is not worrying if you're doing the same material. Like, I always feel like, especially if there's people in the room who've seen you a lot, that even if it's comedians, you feel a bit like, but they've heard this all before.
They're used to hearing it all before, though.
Yeah, that's what I've learned as well. I'd say that's another piece of advice I'd give to someone starting out, is because the more you see the other people as well, the more you end up thinking, oh yeah, they do the same. I
quite like guessing the new bits though with their comics. Like Nessie's expanded her Granny Smith stuff, right? And I hadn't seen her perform for probably a month or 2 months, right? And then I saw her again at my night, and she'd added so much stuff and changed it all around. And I quite like seeing the development in comedians' material. Yeah, I know. Like Danny Mark does talks about similar things, but then over time you just see it develop and become more honed, and I quite like that. I mean,
I've seen them quite a few times, those three, and they're all like fantastic in my opinion. Those guys, when I see them performing, every time I see them, they're better and better. And I thought they were brilliant when I first saw them. So do you know what I mean? They've always been good, and they always tickle me. And some of it is the same, yet somehow they've just ironed it out. And that's the case with a lot of people. Like I've seen Paul Kerr a lot. He's often at similar gigs to me. He always has me in stitches. He's always really funny. And so, there's quite a few out there who I see a lot now, but it doesn't matter.
Paul Kerr's also been on the podcast.
He certainly has. I thought I'd drop that one in for you.
Yeah, cheers, mate. This has just become about who I've spoken to. Yeah. I'll start populating it with people like Ricky Gervais soon. Don't worry. It's coming. I'm in contact. And, Paul Kerr, like, his stuff, right, he's on the same set a couple of times, right? And his bit with being a 7-year-old kid, and he does the stuff. I'm not even going to tell the joke because it's unfair. And he does some of the stuff he does. He tells a story and he leads you on, and you get this amazing silence in the room, right? And then there's the big punch, and it comes, and everyone just laughs, right? But I've seen that laugh not come before. I mean, James Acaster still dies on his ass to this day. Stuart Goldsmith, who does another great podcast called Comedians, is also a comedian that's been going for like 15 years in his own right, and he did Nessie's Wine Gums, and it didn't go as well as it should have done. Like, for someone who's as expensive as he is and as good as he is, you're never immune from a room not getting what you're doing. I mean, James A. Caster's particularly, he's quite slow paced, and it takes time for people to get to know him. So early on, he could go months and months and months with just dying his ass every night, because he's got a very bespoke, different kind of style. And so I think it's really important, and even for you to understand, is that you'll never get away from that. You'll never get away from those nights that are just going to be a struggle, because they're always going to happen. Sometimes it just doesn't work.
I think that's the thing, and I think that one thing I accepted straight away, quite happily, was that it didn't really matter.
Yes.
I've always been quite comfortable with
What's
that.
the worst that could happen?
Yeah, I've always been like, well, I'm used to doing stuff like that. I'm used to trying stuff out in life, in general. I mean, I've always been like, oh, we'll give that a go. What's the worst that can happen? And I did the Bath Comedy Festival. My wife was like, I was quite relatively new. It's for new material, whatever, new act, sorry. And I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, I said, at the absolute very least, I'll take something away from it. Do you know what I mean? And actually, it turned out they had a woman there who was a judge and offered brilliant feedback and stuff like that. And so it was great. And I think, don't be afraid to fail, because it's what comes from those failures is the real stuff.
Yeah,
that's what I think. And you get used to it too, which is even better. Sort of get a bit more immune to it, and you can sort of start really picking fault with yourself. I think it's the best way to refine.
Well, I think you've ticked off one of your things on your bucket list today. You've now been a guest on the Comedians Out podcast.
Tick.
So thank you for joining me, Ben.
Thank you, mate.
Really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Very fun. Thanks.
So that was Ben Aveling. What an amazing conversation. I really enjoyed speaking to him. Great guy to hang out with. Go and check him out on Facebook and Twitter, and go and check his farm shop out as well, Radmore Farm Shop. All the details are in the show notes. Do you know, one of the reasons why I set up this podcast was to speak to people from all levels, from all walks of life and everything. And I find it really intriguing to speak to comedians that have only just started out, all the way through to people like Jason Stamp and Chris Norton Walker and Richard Todd, who have been going for many, many years. And it's just absolutely fascinating to speak to these people, and I really enjoy it. So if you enjoy listening to the podcast as well, please do become a patron. You can go over to my website, lukeanthonycomedy.co.uk/TCO podcast, and all the details of how you can become a patron, get tickets to the live shows, and just other ways you can get involved with the podcast. You can suggest questions, you can suggest guests. I've got some amazing episodes coming up, and you know what? That's it from me this week.